And Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast is here today. He'll join me for another edition of Football at 4. It's a mailbag edition, a Monday Mosher mailbag with your Eagles questions. You can always hit us up in a variety of ways. Text board 609-403-0973. Find us on social media at Mike Gill Show, at 973 ESPN. And Geoff Mosher is here for today's edition of Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast here on the Sports Bash. What's going on, Mosher? How are you on a Monday?
I could be better. I wish the weather was a little nicer, but otherwise not so bad.
Yeah, well, it's a Monday Mosher mailbag, so get in a good mood, man. A lot of the people want to hear your answers to their questions. We got a lot of mailbag questions today, and we're less than a month to training camp. I know you're excited.
Yeah, very, very excited for the fact that there's 3 weeks to go. Actually,
well, when you say 3 weeks, it really starts to resonate. 3 weeks until the Eagle veterans and players all report. That will be on a Tuesday, by the way. So 3 weeks from tomorrow, the Eagles will be at the NovaCare complex. And Geoff Mosher from Inside the Birds, of course, they'll have so much coverage of the training camp and everything, plus his work over at phillyvoice.com. If you have an Eagles question, we can probably fit a couple more in today. 609-403-0973. But Moshe, we got a bunch of them, so let's dive into the Mosher Monday mailbag edition of the Sports Bash on this Football at 4. And we'll start off with one from Kevin in Smithville. As you just said, 3 weeks to go before the start of training camp, and a lot of people would like to hear from you on this particular topic. What is the biggest position battle to watch in Eagles camp, Kevin from Smithville?
Well, I guess the one that's probably the most significant one in terms of starting and potentially team success is Adoree Jackson versus Keely Ringo at the left cornerback spot. That's because I think it feels like a 50-50 competition, or may the best man win, no true leader in the clubhouse. But obviously, they've got a lot of spots to fill. There's going to be, can somebody unseat Moro Ajomo? I even look at the four-man rush and say, well, we know Jalen Carter inside, and Moro Ajomo we would assume would be the other one. But could Ty Robinson get in there? Is there a true number 2 running back battle between Dylan and Will Shipley, to the point where whoever wins it is going to
ordinary at Bet365.
Geoff Mosher workload off of Saquon Barkley, and if it's Shipley, does that add a little element to the passing game? So there are some contextual position battles that I'm really interested in seeing. Number 3 wide receiver, or whether that's more tight end flex. But really, for overall team success, right, the spot that everybody's really looking at is that spot to replace Darius Slay.
Right. Well, there's a bunch of battles. The right guard spot, as you mentioned, some of them. But the biggest one could be who wins that opposite corner from Quinyon Mitchell, because that's a pretty important one, right? That's a pretty important one. We saw how important, Darius Slay was to this defense a year ago. Good question, Kevin in Smithville. And I know a lot of people are going to be wondering as they get to training camp there. Let's go to James in Summers Point. James wants to know, is Nacobe Dean locked in as a starter, or could someone make a push and keep him off the field?
So that's a tough one to answer, because I would say when he's comes back to play, he's 100% healthy and still the same Nacobe Dean that he was prior to the patellar tendon tear. But it's not just also prior to the patellar, right? He's now had the Jones surgery on his foot. He's missed time with the foot. Now the patellar tendon. He had some injuries in college. So eventually that stuff can the wear and tear can make you lesser of a player. And so we have to see, I remember Nate Allen coming back we all thought Nate Allen was going to be the guy, right? It's after so many misfires at safety when they let Brian Dawkins walk out the door. And then Nate had a really significant injury, and he came back and he was okay, but he only got a 1-year deal. He never got a long-term extension. He just didn't look like the same player. So you hope that Nacobe Dean is, and if he is, he'll start next to Zach Bond, and then they will use Jahad Campbell in whatever role, that whether it's edge rusher or also a linebacker too. They'll figure it out. But if Nacobe Dean comes back in his final year here and he doesn't look like the same player, then I don't think anything's guaranteed.
All right, let's get this one from this one just came in actually to the top of the list here from Bobby in Wildwood. Bobby wants to know, what's the weakest area for the Birds?
Well, if we
that's an interesting question. We don't really think don't think of weak spots, right? Everything's the best,
right? Like so, if you micro or zero in, you say number 3 receiver is pretty weak right now, but they can cover that up by having 2 great, outside receivers and then moving other receivers in the slot. I think overall safety without C.J. Gardner-Johnson at the moment, if we're talking about just a position, is probably the weakest position, only because Andrew Nacobe has not played an NFL down yet. Reed Blankenship's a nice safety, but I think we've talked about this before. We kind of have to see how he plays when he's not next to C.J. Gardner-Johnson, because in 2023, when there was no C.J. Gardner-Johnson, Reed wasn't as good. He was part of that implosion too down the stretch, and he didn't play his best football. So sometimes having a guy like CJ frees up Reed to play a certain way. So I would say safety at the moment looks like quote unquote weakest spot on the team.
All right, let's go to Steve in Vineland. I like this question. This one, it's an off season where you get a lot of questions duplicitous, but this one we haven't heard much of. Any concern about the depth behind Lane Johnson, who's another year older, and Jordan Mailata? He missed 4 games last year. They lost Fred Johnson. So who is the depth behind Johnson and Mailata if someone got hurt?
Yeah, I can understand why that would be a concern, but I'm not particularly concerned only because, Fred Johnson came to the Eagles as a guy who had, played for the Bengals. He had started some games for them. It's not like he came as this amazing 1-year kind of signing. He didn't earn an extension for another year, but Kendall Lamb has a lot of starting experience with the Miami Dolphins, and I think somebody before that. So he's on the team. And you've got Matt Pryor, who has played both right tackle and right guard. Right now he's playing right guard, but he's played right tackle before. And those are 2 veterans right off the bat. They drafted Miles Hinton, so that's another guy. I'm not expecting much from the other right tackle that they drafted, Texas Cameron Williams, because he's more of a project. But Darian Kennard is a guy they carried all last year on the team, and he played really well, I thought, in the preseason games. So I think they have a lot of options, and that's all you can ask for at this moment is giving yourself both young options and veteran options, and they have both.
Well, the fact that they lost Fred Johnson last year, it's like who was brought here to replace him? And the first guy, who was the guy from the Dolphins?
Kendall Lamb, to me.
Yeah, Lamb.
Kendall Lamb's a guy who's got a decent amount of games in this league and has played. He's not a Pro Bowler again, but you're not looking at that.
That happened so long ago, you almost forgot that they brought him in.
Yeah, and he's played. Although he had a recent controversy where I guess some quotes were misattributed to him, and he had said that. Yeah, but the guy has played for. He's 32. He's played for 4 teams, 10 years, 44 starts. That's pretty good.
Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast. It's our Football at 4 Monday Mosher mailbag. Every Monday, Geoff Mosher answers your questions. Let's go to Gio and EHT. Which young wide receiver has the best shot to stick? Smith, Wilson, Danny Gray.
I tell you what's really interesting about this trio, Mike, is that all of them have a shot for different reasons. So let's break this.
Well, apart. I'll tell you what, you could tell that the people listen to Football at 4 in the DeCecco segments because Gray is a name that he brings up very often, and now it's infiltrating your mailbag.
That's right. And Gray. So let's start with Gray then. Danny Gray, who was a 3rd-round pick, by the way, I believe it was a 3rd or a 4th-round pick, I think, of the 49ers. So clearly one team thought pretty good of this guy at one point. He has 4.3 speed, all right? And if you really look at the Eagles wide receiver group, 3rd-round pick. If you look at the Eagles wide receiver group, they have a lot of talent, especially with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, but not a lot of guys running 4.3. Not a lot of guys. Remember when Quez Watkins was on the team a couple of years ago, and he was limited? He wasn't as good as Devontae Smith or A.J. Brown, not nearly, but he had a role, right? Because he could stretch the field from that slot position. And so that will be Danny Gray's feather in his cap, that he can stretch the field probably as good as anybody that they have in that entire wide receiver group. And speed, we know that catches a coach's attention. You can't coach it. So that gives Danny Gray, makes him an interesting guy to watch. Johnny Wilson is 6'7", Mike. You don't find a whole lot of that either. And they used him last year as a blocking receiver and sort of a backup tight end when they wanted to run out of 11 personnel but have a bigger body in there. And he's got that, and Danny Gray can't do that, and Anaya Smith can't do that. And that makes him not only a good blocking receiver, especially if you want to get your screen game going or your run game going out of 11 personnel, but your red zone offense, I mean, a 6'7" guy is a guy you can just throw it up to. Now, Anaya Smith is the only one of these three who is just so naturally fitted for the slot, which the Eagles really don't have, right? A natural slot receiver, a guy who knows how to win two-way routes, a guy who's played that position, is undersized, like short, so perfect for that position, but also compactly built. So that could give him the leg up. So they all bring something different to the table.
Good stuff there. Good question there by Geo in EHT. Let's go to Paul in Northfield for the Mosher mailbag. Is there a veteran player whose spot on the roster is not secure that you'll be watching?
A veteran player, well, I mean, there's a couple of that. Like Adoree Jackson, if he doesn't beat out Keely Ringo, may not make the team. I mean, they've got.
So you don't keep him around as the backup in case someone got hurt.
You should. I'm not saying he definitely doesn't. I'm saying it's potential that he wouldn't make the team if he doesn't beat out Keely Ringo. Because remember, you still have Eli Ricks, you have Mac McWilliams, who they drafted. Right, so that's another corner. You've got Cooper DeJean, so you can't keep 6 corners, right? You've got a lot of corners, so I wouldn't say he's guaranteed to make it if he doesn't beat out Keely Ringo. That will be so that's one guy. I think some of the offensive linemen I mentioned, whether it's Kendall Lamb or Matt Pryor, are not definite by any stretch of the means to make the team. And I would say A.J. Dillon is not definite to make the team.
I would imagine those 2 tight ends are probably battling for a roster spot.
Good point, too. They're not going to keep 5 tight ends, and right now they have 5.
All right, let's go to Marcus in Marmora wants to know on the Mosher mailbag, who is Geoff Mosher's NFC team that is flying under the radar going into training camp?
Man, we spent so much time. All right, the NFC team flying under the radar. So I'm not going to pick the 49ers because I think people kind of are now starting to talk about them as like a real good bounce back type of team. My under-the-radar team would be probably from the NFC West. It would probably be the Seahawks. I can't say I have a ton of faith in Sam Darnold, and I do know that they got rid of DK Metcalf, but Jackson Smith and Jigba really came on. They do have a similar – their new offensive coordinator is Kubiak, who does a lot of things from the McVay tree, just like Kevin O'Connell. They do have good running backs with Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet, so they'll get that play action game going. Their defense under Mike McDonald is going to be built up in year 2 now, and he did a great job as the Ravens coordinator. And I think that I think that I was going to either pick them or the Cardinals because I also like what the Cardinals have done, but there's something about the way they're up and down the Cardinals that I can't go with them. But one of those 2 teams is going to be a nice little sleeper team going under the radar right now.
All right, 609-403-0973 if you want to get a question for the Mosher mailbag. Let's go to Tim in Wildwood Crest. I was just down in Wildwood Crest, actually. Tim, more rushing touchdowns this year, Hurts or Saquon?
You were in the Crest over the weekend?
No, last weekend, 2 weekends ago.
I was going to say, I was in Wildwood myself over the weekend. I didn't know. But either way, Hurts or Saquon more rushing touchdowns?
I like the question because I guess it means, do they go crazy with the tush push to just like jam it up the take that, everybody, or does Saquon, because Saquon got a lot of touchdowns taken from him, so maybe he doesn't get to 2,000 yards this year, but he gets like 20 scores.
Yeah, so last year Hurts had, if I remember correctly, I'm going to look it up real quick how many touchdowns he had rushing. 14.
It was my guess. 14.
Yes, 14. And Barkley had more than that, right? Because he had an otherworldly type of year. He had, real quick, he had 13. No, he had 13. So I'm going to go Hurts again because it's really hard to have a year like Saquon Barkley had and then go have a better year the next year, right? So, but for Hurts, he's very consistently in that number because of all the goal line touchdown that he gets. So I'll go Hurts.
Hurts is the play from Geoff Mosher. If you want to bet that one, blame him if you don't get it right. All right, let's go to William in Lower Township. More important to the Eagles' defense success this year, Carter or Smith?
Carter. Carter makes everybody else better. I don't think we can say that about Nolan Smith yet. I mean, I haven't seen that. I think Nolan Smith does a nice job. He's turned speed to power. He's learned his position. He's making pressures happen. And, you can definitely argue he put 2 Pro Bowl right guards out of commission in the playoffs. So that really does help when you put a guard out, right? He did it in the Packers on that to Elgin. I can't remember the guy's name, the left guard for the Packers. He's really good. But remember, he came across on a sort of a pull, and Smith put him out, and then he put out somebody from Kansas City. But I think Jalen Smith has the trickle-down effect where he gets the double teams and lets everybody else eat off the 1-and-1s. So it's always Jalen Carter.
All right, so Carter would be the answer for the most important guy to the Eagles' success, and Nolan Smith, as the outside edge. There's the article that you guys wrote about over at Inside the Birds. I think Andrew had the fact that Jalix Hunt looks like a guy who's putting some workouts in together there, gotten himself a lot stronger.
Yeah, Andrew wrote a great story, caught up with Jalix Hunt's trainer down in Houston, and really went into detail on what the training regimen involves and why it involves that. It was really good detail from Andrew. Great story. Everybody should check it out on InsideTheBirds.com.
Clarence from West Deptford. Mosher mailbag. Jeff, do you look at the Eagles as the clear favorite in the SC? I would imagine that Clarence and some of these are people who have been listening to your series here on the NFC stuff. So he wants to know, are the Eagles the clear favorite in the NFC?
You ever seen the movie Airplane, Mike?
Yeah, a couple of them, actually.
You remember when he says, Roger, over. Do you have Clarence? So that's a good, because clear and Clarence are in the question here. So that made me think of that.
Gotcha.
Do I think the Eagles are the clear favorite? Yes. I think the Eagles, that doesn't mean they're going to win, but I think that they still have the most talent in the NFC East, and the only reason that you wouldn't is the history says that in 20 years no team has repeated. But
no, this is in the NFC, though.
Oh, as the NFC?
Yes.
No. Well, I see them as the favorite. So I guess that if you're the favorite, you're the clear favorite. Yeah. But I think that the Rams are pretty close. And I think the Lions have probably the second most talent in the NFC. I just don't know about losing both coordinators. If the Lions were bringing everybody back from coordinators with the 53 they have, I would actually make them the favorite.
I'm looking at the conference. So the Eagles are plus 300.
Mm-hmm.
Detroit is plus 475. Washington is plus 900. San Fran is plus 1,000. The Packers are 1,000. The Rams are plus 1,100. Tampa plus 1,300. So the Eagles are plus 300. The Lions are plus 475. Would we characterize that as a clear favorite?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really curious now about the Rams because I do feel like I'm on Rams Island. I don't know how they got any worse by getting Devontae Adams and losing Cooper Kupp. I feel like that makes them actually significantly better. And I think they have the best coaching staff, or right up there with anybody else in the conference or in the NFL. And I don't think they had too many losses that I look at and say that's going to hurt them. Michael Hoyt and those young pass rushers they had, Mike Verse, he was a beast. Even against the Eagles, he was a beast. So was Fisk.
Yeah.
I have a hard time thinking the Rams are not going to be a good team. However, as you mentioned, they're not like right behind the Eagles in any kind of like favorite odds on for any sports book. So
no, in fact, when I just read those off, where were the Rams? Plus 2,200.
Yeah, I don't get it. I think
no, actually,
really
sorry,
good.
that is actually their odds are plus 1,100 for the NFC, 2,200 for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, that surprises me. But what do I know? I'm just a sports writer.
We are Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN. Don't forget to download all the Inside the Birds podcasts for your listening pleasure as we get ready 3 weeks to Eagles training camp. By the way, we have a poll question up. You want to answer the poll question?
Oh, sure.
Big moment of the game. Who do you put up to the plate to get that hit? Is it Harper or Schwarber? Who do you trust more?
The hit, Harper. Absolutely.
You're Harper.
By the way, my answer to the lineup debate that you and Josh were going through is to sort of split the middle. I would say if I'm facing a right-hander, I would take Harper to Schwarber 3, right? And then Turner leads off, and then you can bat Bohm 4th. I mean, you can bat whoever, like Castellanos, you want. But then against against left-handers, I would probably move Bohm into the third hole and split. So Harper, Bohm, Schwarber. And I know that means Schwarber doesn't automatically get up, but you're talking about having the lead MLB leader in hits leading off, and then two guys in Bohm and Harper who have really high on-base percentages. So like all likelihood, Schwarber will get up in the first inning because one of those three is probably going to get on base.
Well, and if he gets up, it's generally going to be in an RBI situation.
Exactly. So I have no problem with him batting 4th against lefties.
Well, they got Schwarber hitting 2, Harper hitting 3 tonight. That's the way the Phillies went with the lineup. In Bryce Harper's return to the lineup, he is back for the Phils as they take on the Padres. All right, Geoff Mosher.
The only thing I like about that is, let's say, like, Turner's stealing a lot of bases. He's getting a lot of hits. He's on second. If you want, this is really over analytics, but Harper uses all fields. Schwarber's only going to hit the ball to right field, right? For the most part, sometimes home run to center. Like, I'm thinking about moving this runner from second to third. The guy who's hitting the ball to all that's why I want Schwarber third. Is that who you said Schwarber is third behind?
No, Schwarber's hitting second tonight, and Harper's hitting third.
Oh, okay. So Schwarber would be behind Turner. So yes, so he could move, a fly ball would move Turner from second to third, whereas Harper is more likely to like line out to left field because he uses all fields and not be able to move that runner. I don't know. That's overthinking it. But anyway.
Well, the one thing that intrigues me is the fact that Schwarber will now have the best protection he's ever had behind him. We've never seen him have Harper behind Schwarber. So now they're saying you have to pitch to Schwarber.
Absolutely. I like it. I think they're ready to take off here.
All right. Geoff Mosher, Football at 4. And don't forget, check out all his work over at phillyvoice.com where he does opine about the Phillies from time to time. You can check that out at phillyvoice.com here on the Sports Rush. But Football at 4 is back again tomorrow with Adam Kaplan just back on Wednesday. Thanks, man.
You got it, man. Take care.